Good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Camacho. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Blue Recruit, and I cannot say how excited I am to be here with y'all and our incredible panelists today. We're going to be diving in today as to how good design can help build your business case and ultimately, hopefully bring on additional customers to not only pay, but utilize and have fantastic experiences with your products. Personally, I think the word design is one of those words that can be extremely difficult to quantify. I think everyone can agree that we as humans like pretty stuff, but we often find it difficult to really articulate why that is. After all, if we can't explain it to ourselves, how are we possibly going to impress that onto our customers and ultimately, hopefully, our paying customers? As visual creatures, we instinctively know that design has an impact. But what we really want to dive into today and hopefully figure out how to do that is how to make that impact a positive one. After all, recent studies have shown that it takes an average website visitor only 50 milliseconds upon visiting a site to determine whether they trust that site. Just for a little quick comparison, that blink right there took me 300 milliseconds. So let's not hold up anything else. Let's go ahead, dive into this and figure out how good design can lead to trust, ultimately lead to engagement, positive impact, and an overall great experience. As a quick reminder, feel free to drop in any comments into the chat, and I will do my best to actually read the chat during the conversation. And we will leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions, so please go ahead and drop those into the Q&A. So let's not hold anything up. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. And Dr. Trish Martin, if you don't mind leading us off.
Thanks, Rich. Hi, everybody. My name is Trish Martin, and I am Director of Business Hacking at Globant. Globant is a technology consulting services company that's global and headed out of Argentina. Super happy to be here. I'll talk more about business hacking throughout the conversation, but thanks for having me.
Just to clarify, Trish was not involved with the gas hacking, so that might be a little confusing. Joe, as our legal expert here, please defend Trish.
That's right.
Well, that could be tough to do. Thanks, Rich. Good morning. My name is Joe Dickinson. I'm a partner in the law firm of Michael Best and Friedrich. I practice in the area of data privacy and security. I know Rich talked about this, thinking about the positive impact that design can have. I think my little silo for this discussion is to be a little bit of the little black rain cloud and help us think about how we can take all the potential negatives and turn those into positive aspects by incorporating, analysis and thinking about those things as part of the design process. Like Trish, I'm stuck in the middle of this pipeline breach. And so, one of the things that maybe we'll be able to add as part of the discussion is I don't think Colonial Pipeline thought about this kind of data breach when they designed their pipeline distribution system. But we'll get to that. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I think one nice thing about having it virtual is that we all had to use minimal amount of gas in order to get on today. Jim, can you take it from here, please?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everyone. And thanks, Rich. I'm Jim Hertzfeld. I'm the principal and chief strategist at Perficient. We're a digital consultancy focused on enterprise level product design and making digital experiences real for large enterprises who are building pipelines or putting gas through the pipeline and don't think about digital experiences every day. It's great to be here. Design is really important to us, and evangelizing why this is important and kind of getting around some of the shiny objects that we're drawn to and figuring out how some of these intangibles make a difference for the business.
Jim, you just mentioned good design and whatnot. So maybe a good place to start this off, and we can start off with you, Jim, and just work on down the line, is kind of defining what exactly good design is. I mentioned a little bit in the hard. Design is one of those words. It's hard to articulate. Right. Code? Is it Joanna Gaines putting up flat? Like, what does it mean? So do you mind starting off and what that means to you and how it relates to business?
Yeah, there's a few words, like I would throw digital in, I would throw strategy, I would throw design, these sort of amorphous words. And I have kind of a rule. I said, don't ever use any of those words on their own, right? I need a prefix because, you've got to give it clarity. We have a kind of a running joke. There's in our team, there's an infamous Supreme Court case in 1964 where Joe, you might know this one better than anybody, but where they tried to define the word obscenity. And the best I could come up with was, I'll know it when I see it, so it's kind of a tongue in cheek, look at it. I think, sometimes design is caught in this, again, I'll know it when I see it and I'll judge it based on aesthetics and color. And, without doing another, cliche quote, it's almost cliche, Steve, to talk about Steve Jobs and design, but he just really nailed it when he said good design is more about how it works instead of how it looks. And so we're obsessed with kind of parsing these things out. We actually did a study about a year ago, actually just pre-pandemic, trying to explore this topic and why it's valuable. And so we'll touch on a few of these things, but again, having design is how it looks and how it feels, but also how it works. But by the way, the outcomes it's going to create for the user, the outcomes it will create for the business. How do we answer the voice of the customer and the voice of the business? How do we build things that are competitive, that are secure, that are empathetic? So there's a lot of things I think that come together and that have to be balanced out and trade off and make good trade-offs. I think fundamentally those trade-offs are the challenges, and how you get through those are, I think, why we're here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. All right. Thanks, Jim. Joe, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, from the little black rain cloud perspective, right? I think one of the things that we see, especially in the startup world and with tech companies, is the design process seems to focus, and as it should, on what it is you're developing, the product, the service, and that's really important. But what we see often is that the design process needs to go beyond what it is that you're building, and needs to incorporate some of the issues that your potential customers are facing, some of your potential business vendors and suppliers are facing. And so, perfect example is data privacy and security, right? No matter how great your product is, no matter how great your technology or your service is, if the legal and regulatory requirements of your clients, for example, aren't part of the design process, they may not be able to take advantage of all the great things that you've just designed. And so, for example, in the healthcare space, right, no matter how good your system is, you need to think about the requirements that your customers are going to have, the restrictions that your customers are going to have with respect to the data that they get from you, with respect to the data that they share with you. Same thing with suppliers. What sorts of things impact the external sources of stuff that you need as part of that design, and make sure that you include in the design process what can go wrong with the things that are outside the box that you're building.
Interesting. Trish, I'd be curious to get your perspective on this. Being that you work for an organization based out of South America, with GDPR, constantly becoming more and more affecting businesses here in the U.S. How have you and your team addressed those design needs with what Joe just mentioned?
Yeah, so I think, at Globant, it's all about coming in and partnering with our clients on digital transformation, and really coming in and saying, okay, instead of thinking about it as you have this product and we need to help you to find customers, it's really around, okay, who are your customers, who are your users, and what do they need, and what are their pain points? And then trying to be very proactive and intentional about designing the product and the solutions and all of those processes in advance, but also using an iterative manner to test safely, to try things out first before rolling it out to a product. So I think, especially with data security, we're seeing that a lot right now. Thinking about it in advance and helping to create and facilitate those conversations early before coming in and building out the product. That's probably our biggest challenge right now, and what has been most helpful in moving even the most traditional industries forward.
So let's say that I'm a brand new client of yours. I understand I better bring on some new security into my design process. How would you start off that conversation, or what are some good initial questions to get the conversation started and get that process rolling, Trish?
Yeah, so I think So business hacking, I will say, is really hacking the client problems with the business. And typically that it's in layers. So you have to kind of come in and do some evaluation to determine what are the issues that are there. But a lot of times it's because the design didn't happen first. So, getting back to that design and thinking about security and saying there are certain things that are table stakes. And so knowing that up front and aligning the most important stakeholders that are going to be making the decisions around what are the table stakes that we have to monitor and follow and embed in our design. That is going to really make a big difference, and it's never too late to do that. So part of what our job is as, kind of design thinkers and strategists is to look for areas that we can start. We can make that difference and we can start to hack and change because you need to start somewhere. And so, we look for those, not just low hanging fruit, but the highest priority that matters. And a lot of times in this case, what we're talking about is with security. So there's always a place to start.
Thanks, Trish. Jim, being that what you all do is so involved with the omni-channel, it can be difficult to figure out, hey, where do I start? Let's say we're a startup here in North Carolina, looking to get into e-commerce, looking to get into omni-channel, helping out these small businesses starting to reopen. What's a good starting channel for someone like that?
Well, I think the dominating mantra that we hear all the time is mobile first, which is, and we hear that over and over again. We also hear, by the way, we want to be the Apple and Amazon of, insert your industry, right? So those are sort of mantras and isms we hear all the time. I think that's a good start. I think, but to build on and to get things going, and we have a phrase we like: think big, start small, move fast. We love that mantra as well. And I think, it's okay to start mobile. I think, yes, a lot of buying journeys begin on mobile. They begin with a Google search. They begin, on your couch, watching an ad and figuring out what did I just see? But so I think there's an element of that. But we're a little contrarian. And I think, just to echo what Trish is saying, I think you have to really dig in and understand what the real problems are. And we just recently had and then again, there's research that has to be done. And, by the way, nobody wants to wait, much less pay for research. But there's what customers say they want, and then there's what they actually do. So, sure, mobile's a great place to start. Omni-channel experiences, absolutely table stakes. I don't think that's an option, but I think we have to look at the analytics. There is so much behavior that is digitized today, and it tells us a lot more about what customers really do and really want than what they say. And we do find that disparity all the time. So I'm all for finding a good starting point, but back up and validate both qualitative and quantitative insights to really understand it. And again, I was going to finish an example. We had this default. Again, that's a client very emphatic about mobile first, mobile first, mobile first. We said, guys, like everything, all the data says these are 84%, desktop browser users. And, and there's some low hanging fruit there. So again, I think it's important to find a good starting point. I also think it's in the search for understanding and getting insights. It's both a qualitative and a quantitative validation that's necessary.
Awesome. Yeah. Sometimes, as much as we might think we know the solution, let's look at the data. Let's look at the actual research. Yeah. That insight. Joe, I think this might be obviously with everything going on right now with the pipeline, with the gas, design can be used to very, very, very well, if done correctly, to define a business process. How do you tackle designing, or frankly, probably redesigning in a lot of situations right now for increased efficiency or capacity?
I think from especially from the legal and the regulatory perspective, what we focus on is when you're designing it or redesigning it, at the very beginning, build in the processes for handling when things go wrong, right? And so, for example, our friends at the FBI tell us there are two types of organizations. There are those that have been hacked, and then there are those that don't know they've been hacked, right? And so, and you always hear about the really ugly stuff like the pipeline, but 95% of these issues you don't hear about because organizations have built in processes at the beginning to address those, right? And they're a lot less expensive to deal with. They're a lot more easy to manage if you deal with them up front. And the other thing is, when we're designing or redesigning these things, we need to think about flexibility, because the law always, then the development in the law and the regulations always trails technology. And so as we're playing that catch-up game, we come up with changes in the law, like CCPA, like GDPR, like the new HIPAA notice of proposed rulemaking. And so then all of a sudden you've got this great product, this great system that you've designed, and we change the rules on you because we're in the legal system, we're still playing catch up, right? So you need to think about, as you're designing and redesigning, how do you build in that flexibility? How do you build in planned processes to do things like incident response, to incorporate new legal requirements, not just for you, but for your customers and your vendors. And so that flexibility, I think, is critical because nobody has a crystal ball. Things are changing all the time. And the other thing that I think people typically think about these issues in the context of regulatory enforcement and lawsuits, but those are really a small number of the problems that we see. More often than not, for companies, what's really important is to build the privacy and security issues in up front, because what do we see when you want to sell your company, right? Buyers, one of the first things on their checklist now is, what did you do to build in privacy and security? Investors, their checklist, one of the first things on their checklist is, if I'm going to invest in money in your company, I want to know that I'm not investing in data privacy and security risk. And so show me what it is that you've done to build in to whatever is your product or service is, management of those risks.
No, you're absolutely right, Joe. And I just had that conversation last week with an investment team. It's like, walk us through, and hopefully we took care of it correctly. Jim, I'm curious, with all your different clients, we hear a lot, obviously huge push, especially in tech, DEI. But I'd be curious to see how design can help with DEI, and also just beyond, the regular diversity that we think about is the accessibility, because I think that's often a large issue that a lot of folks ignore.
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject that has evolved rapidly, I would say, over certainly last year, definitely over the last 5 years. I think we've developed a position we call digital responsibility, and it's sort of echoing what you said, Joe. The law sort of lags the innovation sometimes, and I think some of the consequences of innovation aren't understood until time has passed, right? And so, social media, great idea, connect with your friends, connect with your family. Fast forward 10 years, we've curated our own walls and created an echo chamber, and it's been a political force. The things we didn't expect to see as we sort of self-select. So a lot of unintended consequences. Again, I think that's where a strong, again, a holistic view of design is important. As Joe said, consider the legal aspects. I think as you think about what you're creating, what you're unleashing from a digital perspective, how does that affect your users and society as a whole? So I think, first step of digital responsibility for me is you've got to be holistic, in part just to really understand the problem. And I think a really good example, and certainly in healthcare quite a bit, like we think of the patient. Well, if you've never been through a family issue, you and experienced the role of a caregiver, in a healthcare journey, So you have a parent or a child who's the patient, but you're sort of in the middle trying as a caregiver. You you suddenly have a lot of responsibility. So just having the holistic view to think about that situation and not just a sort of linear, simplistic journey. You start to think of the stakeholder. Again, we talked about developers versus users. Developers will design for maintainability, make it easier for the developer. Well, that has a trade-off effect of being really clunky and difficult for the user. So these are kind of classic design trade-offs. I think as you go forward and you realize certainly accessibility was sort of next in that wave, to us, those are just, again, just table stakes, not just from a legal compliance perspective, but from a business perspective, there's a large audience you're not reaching, right? It's got to be factored in as well. And then I think as we go into sort of the D&I, and I think some of the awareness that we've built, particularly over the last couple of years, you really have to think about the impact of two things. One, think about your audiences differently. Think about them holistically. They're not like you. You possess certain implicit social and cultural biases that make their way into the design, and you're not even aware of it. And then you add AI, you add the norms of a conversation. That how does that translate to a virtual agent? Again, it just comes, there's a level of awareness that you need to have coming into it. I go back to a really old, this is going back probably 40 years. The story, the Chevy Nova, which is was built in the U.S., marketed in the U.S., imported into Mexico. Well, nobody knows, if you don't know this, Nova is Spanish for no go. It's kind of a joke now, but think about it. I mean, that's not just bad business, it's insulting, right? It's a miss. So I think there are a lot of reasons to think about building on good holistic design and thinking about the audiences and thinking about the impact and being that the innovation is going to have on society as a whole. And that's just being digitally responsible to us.
No, it's
with the Nova, it's like the Gerber baby food, right? They had a really difficult time selling baby food in China, because in China, typically what you put on the label is what's in the bottle, right? And so they had a picture of a baby on the label.
Oh,
first test markets, the Chinese people didn't want to buy the Gerber baby food because they thought might be a baby in there, right? And the other thing that I think is really important about what Jim just said is we think about this stuff and it always seems to be intimidating as if it's a negative thing, the data, privacy, the security, the compliance issues. But the reality is we see a lot of, if you focus on, as Jim said, your customer and think about what their issues are and their needs are, we see a lot of startup companies, especially, that go to market with whatever their product is, but also with the story that they've thought about data privacy and security, right? And so they're coming to market, not just providing a service or a product, they're coming to market in a way that helps all their customers manage that risk, right? And so like in the healthcare space, that's huge. A lot of healthcare systems, no matter how good your product is, the first thing they look at is, are you helping us manage risk? And if you can say that you are, then we want to really think about doing business with you.
No, that's some great insight that I think can too easily be overlooked. I think we can all agree that design is very, very meaningful to the product creation. But how can we do things to have design guide us to creating the right product? Whoever wants to jump in on this.
I think I could take this, that, really when you're utilizing design thinking, and there's a reason why some of the biggest tech companies really have embraced design thinking, is that it starts with empathy. So this is a good tie from what we just talked about to realizing that we are not the user. No matter, as passionate as we think we are about understanding what is needed, we need to have a pulse on what our customers, what the consumers and users need. So understanding that is critical, and we have to be open and willing to collect and be open to hearing what they say, and then being able to prioritize around what is the most important problem to solve, or what is the most important need to build a product for. Then you go into, okay, how might we create a product to be able to solve for this particular need. So I think it's around how to be proactive and always keep the customer need at the forefront. We do I think the most important emerging fields right now in technology is service design, because it's not just about the product. So even though there are a lot of companies that are product focused, there has to also be a service involved. There's a journey that takes place. So being able to map the journey and how you're going to provide all of the different support components that are involved with that. It's a way to make sure your product actually does, resonate and provide value for the customer. Service design is a way to keep the customer at the very top, and then you build your business processes, your data, all of those regulations, all of that in service of each of those key customer touch points. So I think that that's really one way that we can make sure that design stays at the forefront, is that the customer stays at the forefront and we provide services around it.
Trish,
let me
an example of maybe some of the tools or the actual data that helps map out that service model, because I think that's really interesting. It's not just that initial product. Hey, people want to be carried through the entire experience.
Yeah. So Jim, did you want to jump in first?
No, I was just gonna keep going. I was just gonna double down.
So I think it's around really capturing the full customer journey. And when we think about like the old funnel of, awareness, and, we have to know, where do people start to learn about our brand and engage with who we are and what we offer, and understanding that we might need to provide services and touch points ahead of time before they even touch our product. And then understanding that different people use different channels. So it goes back to the thing about, well, it's great to be mobile first, except for if all of your particular customers are desktop, or there's a certain reason why, they're all on tablets, because they're in a warehouse and they have to move around. So understanding the channels that we are utilizing to interact with them is part of that service design. So it's not just the data that feeds into it and the back and forth of the what we're getting from them and what we're giving to them along the way, but it's also how we are interacting with our customers and making sure that it's their preferred method, not ours. So it's being more holistic around that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Trish. I think service blueprinting and service design, we're seeing more of that, incorporating more of that into our practices as well. Because I think back to sort of another kind of view of omnichannel is, we want and we expect to interact with the brand, right? With not the channel, right? So, and we know that we all have had personal experiences where, man, I'd rather, I have this experience, I have this expression, this level of service in the store, this level online, so on the phone. They're all different. Nobody wants to deal with, the organization's silos and disconnects. And those are just table stakes. We'll probably keep talking about table stakes, but, so I think, interacting with the brand and obfuscating the channel is important. But I think one of the things that I wanted to echo is how do you sell this idea? Because this is a great idea, but sometimes I think our clients feel like this is sort of, there's some voodoo or there's some esoteric thing. Again, like, hey, I'll just tell me when you're done, and I'll tell you if I like it or not, And so there is such an intention about what we do, and I think we try to appeal to those business levers, And I think a lot of it's interesting you bring up service blueprinting, because we find a lot of brands, they've done everything they can to sort of acquire their customers, but service design is really about keeping the customers that you have. And so when you can tell the story in a way that like this is what they expect. They don't want a clunky post purchase experience. When there's a problem, they expect it to be solved in first contact. You want that. It's, if you can accomplish that, that's less expense for you. That is it's gonna contribute to loyalty and retention. And, because once you have a customer, it's a lot cheaper to keep them than to acquire new ones. And so I think, when you start to appeal to those elements, those business levers, it's really important. And that's hard, but it's hard to do when, we're working with a project team who has, who's been given a deadline, and a fixed budget, and the clock is ticking, and they're like, hey, let's just get this out the door. And there's some value to that. Don't get me wrong, but let's not if it works a year from now, if it's providing good service, that's a bonus. But right now we got to get this project out the door. So I think you have to appeal to those things, and sometimes I think good design is about what you don't do, right? And so if you can sometimes, empathy, that's not in the budget, right? That research just we didn't think about it. It's not there. So how do you build it, and in a way that's going to be appealing to people, and that may just be, hey, if we find out that half of this scope you don't need, that's valuable. That's a valuable investment in design.
Yeah, and I think getting back to the service blueprint and just having layers, and I think often people come to us after they've already tried to do a transformation and it didn't work. And so that sort of pain of, in that hype cycle of, we're going to come in and do it all, and then realizing not only could we not do it all, but even the one thing that we tried, the way our businesses are structured, the way our data is structured, it really prevented us from being able to do the cool things and the important things to serve our customers. So I think when they do come to us, then it's more around them saying, I wish I would have done this design first. I wish I would have thought through this first. And we say, okay, let's start from here. So I'm sure, Joe, you've seen that where they go, in hindsight. So I think it's a way to say in front of everyone that's listening today, and tell your friends, like, it saves you a lot of time and headache to think about these things first before going full blast into, a digital transformation.
Well, and I think it's important because, to your point, with service blueprints, I think about data maps and data flow and risk. And I think what's really helpful is that when we're thinking about what we're going to build for clients and how it might help them, we see a lot in my little silo. We see a lot of pushback, not so much on how's your product going to help us, but how is your product going to hurt us, right? What is it about what you're giving us that creates risks or problems for us, right? So I don't know if it's Trish or Rich mentioned GDPR earlier. We've had a number of instances where clients acquired or were in the process of negotiating the acquisition of services or tools, and there was a disconnect because nobody thought about the flow of data, right? And so the app developer didn't think about all the restrictions on data from Europe. And so halfway through the negotiation, the customer said, love your product, can't use it because the fact that you're sending us data that is subject to GDPR and you haven't thought about the legal basis for us receiving the data, the legal basis for us processing the data, that's a lot of risk. And even though we love what you're proposing, we can't actually use it without creating more risk than the value that is in play.
So real quick out to the audience, please remember to drop in any questions you have and we can give that out to the panelists. But one thing that I heard there, and y'all let me know if maybe I wasn't hearing it right, but along with getting your customers on board, I was also hearing, hey, sometimes it's your own internal team. How do y'all go about creating buy-in within your own team? Because these are relatively new processes of design. Trish, you want to start off there?
Yes. So a big part of, as a consultant, we come in and, we're looking at the lay of the land, and we really are part of, initiating this big change. And so, it really, it requires a lot of change management. And then I go back to, that's why when we come in to consult, we use design thinking methodologies, and we use certain frameworks and tools that make it so that it's not our idea, it's their idea. And so we are providing the frameworks and the facilitation workshops. We do a lot of workshopping where our job is to try to get their ideas on the table and help them to prioritize and consider things. So a service blueprint, I mean, it's not an actual, I mean, it's just a framework, but it's a way to help people to see it for themselves, because we need it to be sustainable. We need the change to last even after we're gone. So it's important that we are helping with the change management by making it an internal awareness. And again, I think a lot of it is visualization. Service blueprint is just putting the things that we all are thinking about on, on sticky notes on a board, just to be able to have everybody see it for themselves. Because that's just the kind of, humans are, we're visual creatures, and we need to really understand it. And we want to give people the space to ask questions. And is everyone going to come on board all at once? No, but when you can get those aha moments where people go, oh, now I get why we all have to sit together in this room, even though they're not on my team. Why am I doing this cross-functional work? But coming together and having those aha moments, that's a win for us from a consulting standpoint. And that's part of the design process.
Joe, obviously your entire career is consulting, is being a counselor. Any thoughts on that? And really, it's, hey, I got these great ideas. At the end of the day, it's the client's decision whether to use it or not, right?
So one of the things that jumped out at me that Trish just said are those aha moments, right? And so aha moments can be really good, and aha moments can be not so good, right? And so one of the things that we try to do as part of the design process when we're working with clients is we do what we call tabletop exercises. It's like role playing. And we pretend like you're already in business, and we start talking about all the things that can go wrong. And so before you actually go to market, you've already thought through what can go wrong with our suppliers, what can go wrong with what we're doing, what can go wrong with respect to our customers. And you spend hours thinking about that. And it's amazing how many problems you can design out of the process, right? And avoid those aha moments that aren't so enjoyable.
Joe, I love that. You are the dark cloud, the right dark rain cloud today. But
Hey,
I love it. Well, I love it because it's again, I mentioned there's always a shiny object, and that we work with a lot of clients who they've made a big platform purchase, millions of dollars, and there's a lot of promise that comes with that, and but there's a lot about that they don't know they're getting into, and I was thinking of another use case, Joe, or you triggered for me. We work with a group. It's in the financial services, a regulatory agency in financial services, and their account creation, login, and creation process is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's massive. It's very complicated, and trust me, nobody gets excited about the design of the login, change your password, create your profile, get validated. I mean, it's not what every designer wants to wake up and go do. It's so critical. It's so, and so, yeah, again, back to sort of like revealing what the customers want, but also sort of revealing what everyone needs. And I think, Trish, you nailed it. I mean, people, change management. I do think that's kind of like digital transformation. I think a lot of clients, they've heard that a lot. And I think it's starting to get a bit of a negative connotation because it's hard, it's difficult to do. And I think there's these big platform investments hold a ton of promise, and look, that's when the work starts, right? There are no turnkey cloud solutions. I mean, there's some really good ones, but that's the beginning, not the end. And so I think I love the idea of change management. I'm trying to come up with a way to disguise it differently because it is hard, but I do think that, back to extending the empathy, radar to all of the stakeholders, right? All the product owners, all the department heads, how does a platform appeal to, we're working with a global manufacturer with a big dealer network. So how, what's in it for IT, what's in it for marketing, what's in it for the digital ops team, what's in it for the product team, because their product has a lot of digital experience built into it now, and what's in it for the dealers. So you really have to kind of go around and understand, again, what's in it, what problems are they trying to solve? How do we need them to make all of this work together? And then, how do we make the case for them to get engaged in the process? And so, it's really relationships and people and selling, right? It's all over again. That's why consultants make good project leads.
Yep.
Hey, Joe, a question just came in. I think this one might have been directed towards you. It says, can you share a recent aha moment that really inspired you?
Yeah, you couldn't get gas. There are a lot of those, right? So I'm trying to think what I could say that wouldn't be obvious and reveal who the problem was. One aha moment that was rewarding, right? Jim just reminded everyone that I'm the little black rain cloud. So let me change hats and be a ray of sunshine. Had a client that, like, when you think about all these issues, regulatory issues, legal issues, one of the common themes with all these laws is that they're looking for companies to have a culture of compliance, a culture that prioritizes, in this case, the privacy and security of data. And so we had a client that had a big breach. Everything looked like a disaster. It was in the healthcare space, and we thought, the penalties could be significant. And the regulator, as part of their, they have the same checklist and they ask for all the same documents. And their response, and we had, geared up for the worst. And the aha moment was the regulator said, it looks like you tried to do everything that the laws want to motivate companies to do. And so the fact that you have this disaster, it's not your fault. We don't expect perfection. We expect you to just put your best foot forward. And so the fact that you've demonstrated in your design phase, when you built this app, you thought about data privacy and security. You can't account for the bad actors, for the Russian government and hackers, but you can account for those things that you know about, and you tried to do that. And so not only are we not going to assess a penalty, we're going to close this case, and we're going to provide you with some technical assistance to help you resolve these problems. And we're the government, and so we're providing you this technical assistance, and it doesn't cost you a thing. And so that was a really positive aha moment, because we thought it was going to be a disaster. And what they said was, we know you're not perfect. You tried to get it right. Your design process demonstrates that you try to get it right. So we're going to reward you for the fact that you put forth that effort. Because, remember, there's especially with data and privacy and security, there's two sides to that coin, right? There's what do you do to try to comply with your obligations, and there's what happens when something goes wrong. And the reality is, limited budgets, limited resources, there's only so much you can do on the front end to try to be compliant with all these laws and regulations. But the good news is, as long as you're trying to get it right, in most cases, whether it's a regulatory enforcement action or even in private actions with plaintiff's counsel, if you're able to demonstrate that you tried to get it right, but you were less than perfect, more often than not, the downside is that the liability is significantly lower because of your ability to show that you build into the design process the effort, the attempt to get it right.
Joe, that makes me feel a lot better, because I know, us at Blue Recruit, limited, which I'm sure is the case with many, many companies, limited resources, limited budget. Like what we're doing with our data map is, we can't go out there and create 30 different data maps for all these different state laws that are out right now. So we said, hey, we don't even operate in California, but we're going to follow California's law. And hopefully if something happens, that'll cover us. Who knows?
Well, and that's exactly right. You get credit, you get an A for effort in a lot of cases. And so, don't panic. The sky's not falling. Just do what you can and focus on the red flags the things that are going to bite you the hardest or bite you the most often, and move on, right?
And hopefully I have a new counsel that'll cover us pro bono. I just got another question come in. It says, we're starting to work in design sprints and prototyping. What are some recommendations you have for us to conduct these successfully? Whoever wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think
Really kind of how to best tackle.
Yeah, I'll start with an idea. Start small. I will share this with you. First of all, great. Prototyping is so important. I think it's more economical than ever. There's some great tools out there, dozens of them that don't require a massive and a lot of time, a lot of talents, frankly, to build up some ideas. But I will tell you, one of the things we love to do, and there's actually a little psychology behind it, is we call it a conference room pilot. It's a trick out there, and that is, Trish, I'd love to hear if you've done this before, but is a great starting point. You go out to the cafeteria, a conference room, a lobby. You do sketch your ideas on pencil and note cards, and you ask people what they think. Hey, if you had to accomplish this task through this experience, it's gonna be a card game, and I want to get your reaction. I want to understand where there's friction. I want to learn from this. And I think it's amazing because we've done it where we've literally at 10 o'clock, we've come up with an idea, and 11:30 we're in the cafeteria trying it out. And it's phenomenal in terms of getting a response. And actually the psychology, people will react differently from something you write in pencil than something you sort of mock up. And again, I just said they're great prototyping tools. You can really have a lot of polish. We do a lot of video, which is great for executive presentations. But when you do that, some people feel like oh my gosh, they put a lot of time into this. I don't want to be too critical. When you use pencil and paper, they look at it and say, okay, they just came up with that. They haven't put a lot of it, but I'm going to really tell them what I think. I love that technique to get started.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea of using the sticky notes, right? Is that it shows right away. It's something that it's just very informal that you can just kind of roll up and keep going. And it's cheap to have lots of different sticky notes. So the idea is that any way that you can get and visualize, put it out there and allow people just to quickly do that kind of A/B testing of which one is which. Of course, we had to switch over to virtual. So we're doing so much with Mural and Miro, two great tools that will allow you to sketch and sticky note virtually and vote and all sorts of things. And I think anytime you can do co-design together or co-prototyping, you really put the power in the hands of the user. And with these tools that are coming out, it's so easy to teach them how to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think it saves a lot of time when you can not only not spend a bunch, if it's just not a lot of time spending it on a sketch, but that you're also just doing it together rather than us coming up with an idea and then presenting it to you. Let's just talk about it and, show me and sketch it out. And what would you take away? And you can actually comment inside of the sticky notes. So that's another virtual way to, it's the benefit of virtual. So I think it's collaboration and quick, dirty throwaway. Yeah. And it also helps with change management because it allows people to feel like, oh, okay, so I could fail fast and learn and start over, and it wasn't that painful. So I think, love the prototyping. Look up, for the person that asked the question, look up Mural and Miro and some of these tools that are collaborative for this type of work.
So my stint as the ray of sunshine and not the little is over. One I think red flag for us with prototyping is just remember that whether you're live in the marketplace with the product or if you're behind closed doors just prototyping and alpha beta testing, all those legal and regulatory obligations about how you handle data, they apply in the testing and in the development, the design, and the prototyping phase as well. And think about your competitors, right? One of the things that we see with data privacy and security is your competitors aren't paying attention to you that much until you come out into the marketplace and you start to have some success. Then they notice. And one of the most common sort of tactics for derailing new startup competitors is they attack your design process, your prototyping process, and they say, you know what, back to GDPR, back to HIPAA, you didn't address the restrictions on your ability to use that data, even for development purposes. And so I think that's a problem. And now you have to, instead of going to market and celebrating the success in the design of your product, you're fighting battles over your prototype and your development process, because it's sadly a tool for competitors to derail your progress.
Joe, I'm thinking of a few episodes of Silicon Valley right now. So that's probably would be a homework for everyone if they haven't watched that show.
I think everyone needs to watch Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Jim, I think it was you earlier when you were talking about how the designer creates a process to make it easy. I'm sorry, the developer creates it easy to go in there and maintain it. If you remember in Silicon Valley, the non-technical users go on, they're like, this doesn't make any sense. It's so complicated. Like, what do you mean? Just enter the following code and boom, bang, it works.
Yeah.
I think prime example of why it does take a team effort. Trish, you mentioned a couple tools, for collaborative work. And I think this makes sense because right now it looks like we're about 50-50 as to who's working from home, who's working in the office. As we start going through this transition process right now, and you have some team members in the office, you have some team members at home, you have some team members that seem to be working on the beach. What's the best way to kind of power that transition where you're going to have this decentralized workforce? And what I'm kind of concerned about right now is making sure that the people that are still working from home feel like they're still part of the team now that people are back in the office. I think that's a danger that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, and I actually think we can take a page from education right now. My husband is a school counselor, and he has been talking to me about the challenges and the benefits of teaching when half of your kids are in front of you and the other half are working remotely. And I said, I can feel her pain because I've done workshops where half are remote and half are, working virtually. And all I would say is that you need a tag team. You need to look for one. Facilitating a workshop, that split is probably one of the most difficult things. So you have to lean into your network, and ask for favors and ask for help and do a co-facilitation, where you've got somebody that is looking out and making sure that the people that are virtual are engaged, and you're monitoring a chat and you're monitoring and keeping up. It's one of those things that they deserve it. And so if you're having that mix, it's just difficult to do alone. So I wouldn't try to do that sort of thing. I also think that just like with any decision we have to make about when to have the computer do it or automate it and when to have a human do it, I think it's that same thing of prioritizing the things that are best done in person, and really allowing and being respectful of the things that can be done remotely, so that you're not asking people to, everyone else but this one person is involved. Like, did you really need to have it in person, or was it something that in that case was just as, handled just as well virtually? So, I don't have the exact answer because I think we're all figuring this out, but those are the two things that two kind of helpful hints that I could give is rely on your friends and your network to help you facilitate. And then also think ahead about what could be done virtually and what really should be done in person if possible.
And remember to turn off Alexa when you're working from home.
Yes.
Is it raining again? Is there a cloud in the sky? What's that's a good
Joe
call.
A solid 7 minutes of sunshine.
But I think everybody needs a Joe in their pocket, just to be able to have somebody go, well, what about this? As much as it might be a pain, especially in that design sprint, that design phase, it's great to have somebody that you can trust that has the same goals in mind, that is going to be that kind of doubter, naysayer, and now than later. So
I think And awareness, yeah, and this is where a word, another kind of cliche word. I totally agree with you guys. And just all kidding aside, I think it is awareness. It's this holistic perspective. Again, legal, compliance, D&I, designer versus user, marketer versus product team. But just again, I think good design is about having that holistic awareness. Sometimes that's just the first step.
Well, and you think about it at the beginning, right? In the design process, when you deal with these issues, they're really a lot less impactful, right? It's not, the sky's
Right.
not falling unless and until something happens later down the road and you didn't think about it. They really are not big problems. They're not roadblocks. They're just slight detours if you deal with them up front.
Well, that's the old, sort of TQM theory, right? The cost of avoidance, and the cost of remediation, right? That's really the business case. It's going to take me an hour to fix it now, and it's going to cost me hundreds of hours if I have to fix it later.
So I was going to say, let's wrap up with some final thoughts, but I'd love to answer any final questions. So let me read this out loud. What are practical failure metrics? I think it's right in line with what we're talking about. We should use to determine when a design or prototype should not be developed.
I'll kick one on. I mean, I think the one that we look at is just what we would call task success, right? So if I, again, I separate design, look, process, screen, data, content. At the end of the day, we're asking users are there to complete a task, solve a problem, and that the number one metric for us is, did you accomplish the job, right? Did you complete this task? That's probably the most dominant one that I can think of.
Yeah, I think a good framework to look up for that would be the jobs to be done. That, there are jobs that need to be done. And first and foremost, above and beyond the pain relievers or gain creators, is it helping me to do the job that I have to do? Because everything else is going to be secondary. So I think jobs to be done is a good way to think
Great
about
framework.
Awesome.
Well, I think, are you building what you want to build, or are you building what your customers need, right? Because sometimes they're not the same thing. And so if you start out with the right focus, I think the other stuff tends to fall into place.
Gang, as we wrap up here, I'd love to hear kind of your final 30-second shot and any advice you have for the audience as we get ready to move into the next step of the conference.
I think the number one thing that I want to say to folks is that we need to build in room to innovate. We have to understand that the world is changing very quickly and industries are merging and disappearing and evolving. And so I would just encourage everyone to prioritize that as leaders, prioritize making sure that you are asking the question and you're questioning our assumptions about what tomorrow is going to bring and allowing yourself to be ready to learn something that maybe means that you're going to have to change. But knowing that, you could do it, that there's tools and there's people out there that can help you with it. So
I think that from the legal and regulatory perspective, don't think of it as restrictions. Think of it as opportunities, asset management, risk management, because you're going to have to address this stuff sooner or later. And if you address it in a positive light, you can go to market as a better business partner, problem solver, risk management partner for your customers, as opposed to just all this stuff that seems to get in the way.
Yeah, I would say just ask why. That's probably my single favorite question. Why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? I had a client years ago. He would start off every meeting with what problem. He was kind of a bomb thrower, but it was a good one. What problem are we trying to solve here today? And I just but there's a lot of truth to that. And I think asking why is a great start to a project. It's a great start to a meeting. It's a great start to your day.
Awesome. Well, gang, thank you so much for your insight. I know I learned a ton. I'd like to thank the audience for listening. Hopefully they learned a ton. And at this time, I'd just like to pass it off to digital version of Trish as she takes us off into the next part of the conference. And I just hope everyone, like I said, learns something and enjoys the rest of the conference. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Appreciate it.